Hey everyone, welcome back to the Phoenix's Tale. I am your host Gabe, and this week we are going to be diving into Chapter 11, the Firebolt. But before we can do that, we need to go through our recap. So, our chapter opens the day after the scene at the Three Broomsticks, where Harry finally finds out the truth about Sirius Black, and he's still reeling from that news. Finding out that Sirius Black was not only his father's best friend while they were at Hogwarts together, but that Sirius is also Harry's godfather. It is also the first day of the holidays, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione talk about what they heard in the Three Broomsticks the day before. Mostly, Ron and Hermione are fearful that Harry will now go after Sirius Black, which is exactly what Arthur Weasley warned Harry not to do before Harry boarded the Hogwarts Express. In an effort to change the subject eventually, Ron suggests going to see Hagrid, to which Harry agrees because he's still angry that nobody, absolutely nobody, bothered to tell him the truth about Sirius. So they get to Hagrid's to find Hagrid in quite a state. Hagrid received a letter from the ministry that they don't hold Hagrid accountable for the incident with Buckbeak and Draco Malfoy. As for Buckbeak, however, a hearing was set for April, at which time they'll determine Buckbeak's future. Eventually, Christmas arrives with just a few students remaining because of the situation with Sirius Black, especially following his attempted break into Gryffindor Tower. Among the gifts that Harry received that year is a Firebolt, the same racing broom that Harry visited multiple times while he was enjoying his freedom in Diagon Alley. After the Christmas feast on Christmas Day, Hermione stays behind to talk to Professor McGonagall, while Ron and Harry return to the Gryffindor common room to admire the Firebolt. After a few moments, Hermione returns to the common room with Professor McGonagall, who confiscates the broom to have it inspected, because, as Hermione explains, after McGonagall leaves the common room with the broom, it is believed that Sirius Black sent Harry the broom. So, this week, I thought we would discuss emotional regulation challenges, as we see this quite a lot from Harry throughout this chapter, from that sense of betrayal that Harry experiences upon learning the truth about Sirius, to his anger with Hermione on the, about the Firebolt on the heels of discovering Sirius's betrayal. However, it is the first podcast episode of the month, and we need to celebrate some birthdays for the month of April. And what's even more amazing is the first episode for the month of April falls on April 1st, if you are watching this the day it launched. So I am very, very excited to wish a very happy birthday to my favorite characters of the entire series, Fred and George Weasley. Quite fitting, if you ask me. Fred and George Weasley being born on April Fool's Day. Yeah, that's great. So this month, we also wish a very happy birthday to Cho Chang on the 7th, to Teddy Lupin on the 11th, to Hannah Abbott on the 12th, and to Professor Horace Slughorn on the 28th. For those of you who are reading along with me and are new to Harry Potter, we meet Professor Slughorn in a couple books, so hold tight. Anyway, so this week, as I said, we're going to be discussing emotional dysregulation. And naturally, we will be discussing it from the perspective of PTSD/trauma and autism, because that's all I truly know. So I hope it still helps those of you who might have other forms of neurodivergence as it applies. So here we go. Let's first take a look at Harry's emotional state in this chapter. So, what's happening emotionally in this chapter? We see that Harry is consumed with rage at Sirius, filled with revenge fantasies and none of that can be soothed by Ron and Hermione. He perseverates is a fancy psychological term that means involuntarily repeating or fixating on a thought, a behavior, a word, an action beyond what is appropriate or helpful. A lot of people with PTSD perseverate, specifically the trauma event. That's what gets replayed over and over and over, and they cannot stop it. That's perseverate. So, Harry perseverates on the betrayal story he overheard, mentally replaying it instead of shifting to normal school life, or in the case of the Christmas holidays, just having fun with Ron and Hermione, and probably Hagrid. When the firebolt is confiscated, his anger spikes again, and he withdraws into resentment rather than communicating or problem solving. Now, I know it can be easy for a lot of people to write off Harry's behavior in this chapter as a moody teen. But what we see is actually much bigger than that. Considering the experience he had of growing up in an abusive household as an orphan, it is easy to suppose that Harry is already dealing with complex PTSD from that alone. And this is why I wanted to look at this through the lens of PTSD, trauma, complex PTSD, etc. So, with the trauma PTSD lens, why his reactions are so big. Scholars and clinicians point out that Harry's broader pattern across the series looks a lot like PTSD. Intrusive memories, negative beliefs about safety and trust, emotional numbing, and angry outbursts. In this chapter specifically, we have some trauma triggers. Learning that Sirius betrayed his parents connects directly to the original murder trauma, so his rage is not just about Sirius Black. It's his whole origin story getting ripped open again. And this is exactly what I discussed a couple episodes back in Chapter 9, Grim Defeat, when I experienced a PTSD trigger that had me basically living the original trauma. Altered beliefs. Trauma formulations talk about ongoing and distorted beliefs like no one can be trusted, and chronic anger or horror. Harry turns Sirius, his godfather, into the symbol of all of that betrayal and danger, which magnifies his response. His parents died. His very own godfather was responsible. That would be a lot for a 13-year-old to carry. Excuse me. Hyperarousal. People with PTSD often sit in a fight or flight state. Irritability, being on edge, and explosive anger are part of that. Harry's readiness to act on revenge, plus his inability to calm down, even when Ron and Hermione talk to him, use logic, fits that pattern very well. So, let's pause for a moment because I want to discuss this in my own life. Over the last couple years, I've been working through the effects of my mother's behaviors during my childhood that added to the negative effects of my father's verbal abuse. As someone who is always in my head, it is not surprising to say that certain behaviors of hers have connected to other aspects of my experiences in childhood, as well as this recent 13-year stretch of PTSD. I realize that I'm dealing with, or I now realize, I should say, that I am dealing with a certain amount of betrayal trauma from that, because there are many other ways my mother could have acted, like actually checking in with me over the last 13 years just once to see how I'm really doing. She hasn't done that. And I want to make a quick note here about betrayal trauma before moving on. Betrayal trauma occurs when somebody you depend on for safety, especially a caregiver like a parent, violates that trust through emotional neglect, invalidation, or absence, creating a survival level wound that complicates other traumas. So let's get back to the bigger discussion and continue that now through an autistic lens. So again, other neurodivergent types, some of this might land, some of this might not. Just bear with me here. Clinicians have discussed how autistic people often experience emotions and sensory input more intensely and have more difficulty regulating and expressing those feelings in ways that others expect. Yeah, I know that. Some key concepts of this: intense emotions. The intense world theory of autism suggests autistic individuals feel and respond to emotions, especially fear, more intensely, and fear memories can be more persistent and harder to extinguish. For example, Harry's lingering, all-consuming hatred and fear around betrayal mirrors that kind of intensity. I mean, we see how he reacts to this now betrayal he's learned of his godfather, who was his father's best friend. Alexithymia. Many autistic people struggle to identify and describe their own emotions, alexithymia, which can show up as shutting down or blowing up seemingly out of nowhere. We see this with Harry and can describe it as having giant internal storms. This would be how I would describe it. But limited language or skills for naming them, so it all spills out as rage or withdrawal. And then we have social misunderstanding. Autistic people can deeply care but struggle to communicate empathy in the right way, which leads to conflict. Hermione, for example, Hermione's safety-driven choice with the broom by telling Professor McGonagall about it, and the fact that there was no note, no card, nothing. It was just, nobody knows who sent the broom. And she's worried that Sirius Black sent it to him and that it could be jinxed, etc. Her safety-driven choice with the broom and Harry's reaction illustrate how different internal priorities and communication styles can make someone look uncaring, Hermione, when they're actually terrified for you, which clearly Hermione was. I mean, she had her heart in the right place. But from Harry's perspective, when you think about the entire emotional load he's carrying in this chapter, you know, it makes so much sense. Anyway, where PTSD and autistic experience overlap in Harry's behavior. So we're going to look at that. So big reactions to perceived betrayal or safety threats. Both trauma survivors and autistic people can react disproportionately when they sense danger, rejection, or loss of control. The firebolt, which for Harry brings hope, joy, etc., being taken away hits both safety and identity, so Harry's reaction is massive. You know, Harry being an outstanding Quidditch player, a natural, we saw that in before that, Sorcerer's Stone during their first flying lesson, and Draco finds Neville's Remembrall, and Harry just hops on that broom and he goes. And it says in the book how wonderful and how freeing it is. Yeah, I can see where something like that would absolutely crash land, and Harry's just completely shutting out Hermione after that. Rumination and fixation. Trauma can lead to intrusive, repetitive thoughts. Autism can involve special interests and cognitive stuckness. Harry's repeated mental replay of Sirius's betrayal and what he should do about it feels like a blend of trauma, rumination, and intense focus. Yeah, he can't stop thinking about it. Relationship fallout. Both groups can struggle with emotional regulation in friendships, leading to blow-ups, withdrawal, and people labeling them as overreacting. The way Ron and Hermione try and fail to reach Harry is a perfect example of this. More often than not, for those of us who are autistic and dealing with trauma/PTSD, we often only get one piece of the puzzle recognized, and that's usually our trauma. And the underlying neurotype, in my case, autism, is missed. In fact, there is new evidence that supports autistic experience in PTSD following an event that, on the whole, is not traumatic for normal people. Even other neurodivergent types. This is specific to autistics, is what I'm talking about here. But it's not traumatic for normal people. That includes other neurodivergent types who are not autistic, but ADHD, OCD, etc., but is for the autistic people because of our unique brains. And I'll likely do a dedicated episode on this down the road to get more detailed, but for now that's sufficient. So, gentle psychoeducation we can weave into this. So, emotional regulation is not about not feeling, but about having the tools to write out those big moments, those big emotions, etc., without hurting yourself or anybody else. Trauma can keep your nervous system in survival mode. So even small changes feel life or death. And yes, even if that change is ultimately good. Autistic folks may experience emotions more intensely, normally, and have different communication styles. That doesn't mean that they care less or are too much. We are not. If I am too much, go find less. If you think I don't care and you're not willing to have a conversation with me, go away. Stop bothering me. Friends like Ron and Hermione may think they're helping by using logic or fixing the situation, but what actually helps, I'm living proof of this, what actually helps is safety, validation, and time, all of which I have not gotten. Now, if this is something that you are struggling with currently, I have some ideas, scientifically proven, of course, that will help, because that's why I'm here. So let's go through some practical tools that you can do to help yourself, especially if, like me, you're struggling to get the proper mental health help that you need. So, number 1, somatic grounding techniques. Using sensory-focused exercises like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you name 5 things you see, 4 things you touch, etc. You use it to interrupt hyperarousal. Studies show this reduces PTSD fight or flight states and autistic sensory overload by anchoring to the present. Visual emotion scales. I like this one. Instead of verbal descriptions, rate feelings on picture charts. For example, you might use an image of a volcano erupting as rage. Trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy adaptations for autism proves this bypasses alexithymia, improving identification and regulation. This is why I like this one, because even now I do have a difficult time naming my emotions and, what am I really feeling? Am I angry? Am I frustrated? Do I just need to sleep? I still struggle with that sometimes as somebody who's autistic, compounded with the PTSD. So I liked the idea of using imagery to discuss moods and emotions. So for me, I would pick, something colorful, like I'm thinking of a spring day type thing, some grass, beautiful multicolored wildflowers, beautiful blue sky, maybe a glimpse of the ocean in the background. That for me would be calm. A volcano, I like the example ChatGPT gave me when I was working all of this out, using a volcano as rage, etc. We can also recontextualize exposure. Recontextualize exposure. Yeah, I read that right. Safely revisit triggers. For example, Harry's betrayal rage over Sirius in low-stakes settings to rewire memories. Mouse model research confirms it cuts PTSD persistence and autistic perseveration. There's that word again. So we're going to talk about that one. And here's a step-by-step on how to do that. So we're going to recontextualize exposure. Basically, we're going to safely revisit triggers. So number 1, identify the trigger. Pinpoint the specific thought or memory loop. For example, Harry's rage at Sirius's betrayal, or my mom's emotional absence or immaturity, whatever you want to call it. Number 2, choose a safe recontext space. So pick a calm, non-traumatic environment like your bedroom, a park bench, somewhere unrelated to the original pain. Number 3, reactivate briefly. Spend 1 to 2 minutes intentionally thinking or talking about the trigger memory while physically in that safe space. You can write it, journal it, basically. You can say it aloud to a friend. You can visualize it in your mind. Having a trusted person with you would be an excellent idea for this part, if possible. Just my little note on that. Anchor to new context. So, what you're going to do next is immediately note 3 to 5 present details. I am safe here on April 1st. I keep wanting to say today's date as I'm recording this, so this is coming out April 1st. So I am safe here on April 1st. The sun is warm. The birds are chirping, linking the memory to this safe moment. And then repeat it daily. Should take no more than 5 minutes to do this for you. So do short sessions for a couple of weeks, because mouse studies show this reshapes hypermnesia into normal memory, thus cutting the perseveration. Some other things that will help: structured breathing with timers. So use something where you can see the seconds, or if you have a metronome, anything like that. You want a steady beat for this. So we're going to do 4, 7, 8 breaths, which means you inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds. And time it visually. Randomized trials in autistic youth shows that this lowers irritability and rumination without overwhelming social demands. This particular exercise is one of my favorites when I need that in the moment. I need to calm down. You may have seen me do that in the past, where I kind of stop, take a breath, because when I start getting excited about things, it starts to feel a little manic to me. And I know that with this constant survival mode of trauma for 13 years and blah, 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 this is a good one for me. This one works really well. I don't know where I was going with that thought. I'm sorry. Interest-based metaphors. I like this one. And we're going to go into some detail on this one. So, frame regulation as a special interest. For example, Quidditch broom as your safety gauge. A Quidditch broom is a safety gauge. Autism adapted CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy, trials demonstrate this boosts engagement and skill retention in CBT for comorbid anxiety and trauma. So I want to focus on this last one because it can be confusing. It took me quite a while to work it out. And I am going to use my personal interest in tarot as an example as we walk through this. So first, think of this in turn, and this works for any special interest you have, and you assign it, but think of it as a traffic light. You have red, yellow, green. Okay, so whatever you attach to the green, for me, I might choose the star card in a tarot deck. This is feeling good. This is calm, clear, safe. We're good to go. For example, for the yellow, I might attach the Chariot. Tension is starting to build at this level. So stress, irritation is rising. And then you have red, which is crisis mode. From the tarot deck, I would use the Tower card. So this is the rage, shutdown, overwhelm stage. How to use it takes just a couple minutes. You could start in the morning, and again with my tarot example, what is my card today? How am I feeling right now? Is it the Star? Is it the Chariot? Is it the Tower? Whenever a trigger hits, you can claim, oh shit, I just drew the Chariot card. It's time to breathe and do that breathing exercise. Or it's time to go stand outside and literally hug a tree or stand barefoot in the grass. Whatever works for you in that moment to calm and center yourself. Okay, that's, when a trigger hits. When shit really hits the fan, that would be like, oh, okay, the Tower card just came out. Now I really have to do some serious grounding and probably journaling, probably a deeper tarot reading, whatever. So, an example from my life would be, my mother says something that dismisses some of my pain, my trauma. She pulled the Chariot card again. Or when things are feeling really heavy, like they did yesterday. Long story. Had a bit of a shakeup. And anyway, I'll tell that story another time. But yesterday, had I remembered this, I would have said, oh, okay, I just pulled the Tower card in this exercise. And so now I need to, get serious about everything before I fully just completely lose my shit. So, why this would work for me is because I'm already beginning to start reading tarot intuitively. And this is what ChatGPT gave me on this thread I have. So, my autistic brain will track the Tower a lot faster than I'm really seriously pissed off. Regulation becomes card reading, not therapy homework. So I'm shifting it into something that I understand and I know. Another example. I'll give you another example to help you out with personal interest. Let's say, for example, that you are a drummer. You play the drums. And you would start by assigning each mood, those traffic light colors, to a piece of equipment. So, for example, and this is just based on my knowledge, I don't play the drums. I don't know anybody who plays the drums. I have been thinking about taking lessons, and that's on my list of hobbies I would like to try once I gain some traction with, some income here. But I would liken, the green light, everything's good, to the stool that we sit on. Okay, everything's good. Yellow, I would say a broken drumstick. I've seen drummers have tons of, because when they're beating the shit out of the drums, stick goes flying, it broke, you grab another one and you keep going. So that's yellow. Something, we got some tension hitting. I would assign a broken drumstick to that. And then red would be the cymbals. Okay? Because loud, explosive. Oh, shit. Okay, here we go. And then continue on with the rest from there. What's brilliant about this particular tip is that you can literally assign anything to the yellow, green, red format as you wish. And choosing a particular interest of yours means that you'll know the lingo for it. For example, for a drummer, the stool, like I said, represents being ready to play. All is good. That broken drumstick indicates being in a state of, or in the middle of something. And I likened it to, okay, I got the drumstick in hand. I'm ready to beat the shit out of something. Bam. And oh shit, it broke. Okay. Got to grab another one. And then the symbols being red, well, I'm sure you can understand why that would work for me, because just that, thunderclap of noise. So I hope that helps, if that makes any sense. So that brings us to a really good point, I think, to wrap up for the week. Next week, we're going to be discussing chapter 12, the Patronus. And I cannot wait for that discussion. I've got pages of notes already for things I want to talk about. So until next week, don't let Hermione see your new racing broom. Maybe just not mention that. Until then, or until next week, I'm going to go to bed now. Have a good week, everyone. I'll see you next time.